No. We're not there yet. So I've got a ritual, right? So what I do is I'm going to go to, oh, this is yours, right? So I'm going to go to your profile. I want to really make sure that this is true.
Okay.
Oh, it says a minute before the long night. I love that title. So now I'm going to click that. So it's going to be on my timeline also. This is really cool. And now I turn down my music because this is a ritual.
Okay.
I got this all figured out. So now I turn down my music because it keeps me cool, right? It keeps me really calm.
Okay. All right.
And now it's yours. So everybody has to like hopefully kind of endure kind of the behind the scenes things because now I'm going to go to Periscope, right? And I don't see it there. So forget about the Periscope. We are live. This is so exciting for me. And thank you so much, Sean. I'm really I'm excited for this.
Yeah, Adam, you got me hooked up here. You got me working on this thing and setting this up.
I do.
Yeah, thanks for all the pointers.
Yeah, it's fun, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm kind of a functional introvert, so this is always kind of tough for me to get out there and do this.
Yeah, I like it. I really like Periscope. I'm gonna miss it when it's gone because I like that sense of kind of regained intimacy. I feel it's something we've all lost. So for me, I feel like this is I do the investor series. So I feel like this is lunch and we've done a few of them now. So I feel like it's also dinner with friends and a lot of people are joining us and it's just, it's fun. It's the same dinner or lunch that I would be having with you if you're in the city and we just have a lot of people joining us and you're the guest of honor. Cool, right?
Yep. So have you tried out the new Twitter version of this? Is it any good?
I have, and I have to deny it. No,
okay.
I haven't.
Right.
I'm in like a sworn state of secrecy, but I don't think it's going to be the same. I think it's going to be more like a Zoom type of experience. And when it's on, Zoom is kind of, the problem is with Periscope, right, is it's a frictionless experience. With YouTube, it's a destination, right? I've got to go to YouTube and I've got to drop everything around me, right? And I need to focus all of my attention on it. Unless it's a lecture or something like that, I listen to YouTube a lot. But when it's Periscope, it's frictionless. It's not a destination, and it's there, and I can enjoy it as part of that. And it's on a feed, so people today are going to see it in a month from now as though they've just discovered it. So that's the way it's. But this is yours. You're
right.
The star. You're the star.
And thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much.
Hanging out.
I persuaded you to do this, right?
Yeah, you did.
I did.
It's a perfect time to do this, though.
I'm
surprised we haven't talked before this. I mean, it's been a week, and
it has. But we spoke. I think we did a really fun Periscope right after the election. I think it was after the election. It was right after the election. I know it was really popular, and we had a chance to talk about it then and what happens with MAGA, what happens with Trumpism, and everything got thrown out the window, right? Everything. Yep. Those last two tweets, and you and I DM'd about it with our friend Chuck, did a lot of damage, I think. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, he did damage himself, but I mean, the events are much more complex and had a life of their own. And I don't even think people even saw those for the most part. It just zoomed. I mean, there are bigger forces at work here, and the stuff, I've been writing about, stuff you've been writing about, and those forces took control. And, we saw it, just after the Capitol event and how quickly the corporations jumped in and how quickly everyone started talking about, counterterrorism effort and a counterinsurgency effort at the extreme end. And, that stuff has been building up for years. I've been writing about it, and and you're talking about the corporate kind of roll up of power and the political roll up of power, and it's all these little tweets at the end. I was like, it's not good form, right? It's not good to do what he said at the end. But the thing is, it's kind of a little extra noise there going into this.
Yeah, It is interesting. I really want to get your take on it, because my take was, when he did those tweets, is that they were horrible. And I thought that he was playing with the ambiguity of language at a time that he's on double secret probation.
Right.
So it was kind of a recklessness, almost to the point that perhaps they had some type of a psychological profile of him, like kind of a psychopathic type of profile, kind of like would Alcibiades concede the loss?
Right.
And Alcibiades never conceded a loss, right?
Yeah, I mean, did you think he was going to get cut off? I mean, at the time of the election, did you think he was going to get cut off before he left office? I mean, I predicted it he would, but I was like, I didn't think he was going to make the election or make the change in power. But, I thought I was going to lose, up to the last couple of days.
I think the greatest of your kind of predictions, if I were to say predictions, which is kind of a careless word in itself.
It's not so much, yeah. It's just projections.
Well, was about 2 years ago when the clampdown on the NRA began. And you said it's going to kind of be occurring through proxies and surrogates, which were the banks. You said that they were going to kind of lead kind of the charge, and that they were going to kind of use their power. And you were so right, and it was so successful. And now we've seen that, throughout everything. The megacorps are really taking over, and they have no fear. It's no
fear at all. I wrote that. I wrote a report back in 2000. I started going back through my old reports just to see if I actually hit something, or I was actually right in my thinking. And a lot of times I just forget what I wrote, forget the kind of structure and the detail. And I went back and I pulled up like the corporations takeover report, and it detailed how they were kind of the government is outsourcing stability operations to these corporations. And they were starting to, take over a lot of the control of society in order to keep it within a box from flying apart. And then the whole long night stuff, and the how things were going to roll out with companies actively disconnecting people in order to drive everyone towards a single unified kind of concept of reality, or shared reality, and that over the long term would create what I call the long night, meaning that we're all squeezed down to this very narrow view of the world. No dissent is allowed. Nothing is, if you step outside the lines, you would be disconnected from not only the social networks, but everything, all the way down. And I was writing all this stuff, and people were mentioning it to me over the last couple of days. They thought it was just the worst case scenario. That was just, hanging out there as something to be potentially worried about in the future, and that they now go, wow, it's here. It's arrived. When they took out Trump, and they took out the parlor, and they took out, starting to take out so many individuals and so many different systems. Now they're talking about taking out the conservative news sources. It's a signal to the world that the big networking companies can do it to anyone, and that they took out presumably the most powerful person in the world, was the U.S. president, and without consequence.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It is remarkable, and I think I really appreciate you, because you got kind of that same dilemma that I find myself in. Is both of us are struggling not to be participants in this,
right?
And it's kind of difficult, because I started going on these late night Twitter rampages. I'm like a berserker on Twitter, because it is very difficult to try and kind of be as much of a disembodied intellect as is possible, and to try not to get sucked into the subjective. Very difficult when you got Trump tweeting very carelessly, and you've got the media had already kind of scripted their response to it, and everything that we've seen, we're seeing more. There's more National Guard, or there's more, whatever you call these things. I'm not a military expert, you are. But whatever it is, there's more of them in D.C. now than there is in Afghanistan. Right. And I saw your tweet today that, when are these people going home? And they're never going home. They established a green zone. And now we have also watched these politicians who have over several months and years retreated to Ravana, right? They've gone a lot of distance from their electorate. They've now completed the transformation, and they're basically Mexican drug lords. I mean, they've got their own like little militias. They're never. I don't think any of this is going home. I think they've changed everything. Do you expect the green zone to be kind of disassembled?
Well, I mean, the more infrastructure they put in, like they were putting on new 12-foot walls, unscalable walls, and it looks like it's kind of a permanent installation. And the number of troops, I mean, the 25,000. It's just an amazing amount of military might that they rolled in. I don't see it going away anytime soon. I mean, every single incident, if there is any incident, will serve to cement them in place. And it's almost like they've already made the decision that they're going to roll out, what I warned out. Again, another report 2 years ago was like, okay, if the Trump insurgency forks and it goes into violence, and some fork of it goes into violence, it would trigger a big effort to roll out a domestic counterterrorism program, Patriot Act 2.0, and potentially as that starts to crack down, it starts to surveil people and starts to say that anyone who's even remotely associated with Trump or anything is now implicated in domestic terrorism. That turns into an insurgency, and what wasn't more than just a handful of groups or little scattered angry people or making threats online turns into something worse, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. It becomes a counterinsurgency, and then a domestic counterinsurgency, and then you end up with Iraq. And these insurgents aren't going to do this, the standard. I mean, there will be, if it ended up in that direction, they'll break stuff. It's a systems disruption. This country is built on layer upon layer of infrastructure and codependencies. These networks are really easy to break. You don't even have to kill anyone to take the thing down. It's like, take down the electricity and stuff like that. That's horrible. I mean, it's what they did in Iraq and what they've done in other countries. Guerrillas are very effective at this. But in a modern country like this, that's a lot of vulnerability. So you can see how just the dominoes go down, 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 and just, it's very.
But you've been writing about, and in fact, it's what brought us together the very first time when you were writing about resilient cities, which is something I'm very interested in. I know all the politicians in New York, and I was very interested in the idea of resilient cities because I saw New York being particularly vulnerable to social disruption, and that also means kind of our assets vulnerable to dislocation. And you and I first spoke about that.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the things I had in Brave New War a little over a decade ago. Is that the way you get through a world where everything is disrupted, everything is broken, is that you produce more domestically, produce more locally. And that, you don't want to replace it all. You don't want to totally disconnect because the burden and the expense is too high. You want to connect on your own terms. So you use the external resources and external services when you can, and then you produce what you can't when it breaks down. Like, I have a generator that, serves as a backup. It's a whole house generator. It can pop on in 20 seconds. And that kind of thing, extra garden. It's not to replace all the food I have, but if in a pinch, you can expand it. You never know in this disruptive environment, how things can evolve. And if we're getting pushed in that direction, through a green zone, through counterterrorism efforts, through people testifying in Congress last week about how we're almost on the into a domestic counterinsurgency, and that kind of loose rhetoric, but it is, if we get pushed into that based on that, this is going to end up badly.
Yeah, and and I see there's a lot of questions here, so I want to make sure you're responsive to them because it's your Periscope, and I see some really cool questions here. So I'm very bullish on what people think of as America. Isn't that surprising that I've been asking everybody to invest? I probably DM'd you in March, like I did a lot of people, and I've said, you got to buy into this market. You've got to buy. The elites are self-dealing. The markets have a lot of liquidity. They can take money out of it. There was a lot of reasons. And at the same time, our underlying economy is healthier than any other economy in the world. Can we stay like that is unknown, but we're a healthy economy, even with all this unpleasantness in front of us. So I'm very bullish on the economy. I'm very bullish on Space Force, but I'm definitely very concerned about kind of the kind of moral corruption and how that cascades down. I'm concerned about the election that the votes weren't allowed to be interrogated. It's a very odd thing, but that there wasn't even kind of an intellectual curiosity that came from the left, I think is very troubling.
Yeah, no, that has to do with the kind of tribalization that's been going on, that network tribalization, that dynamic I was talking about. How the online world builds up these kind of tribal structures, and then anything that the other side does, any kind of new information, any fact that they present is considered an attack, something meant to damage you. And that was certainly the case when it came to kind of any examination of election. It's a fertile ground. The election system is a fertile ground for kind of doing that, because it's a patchwork of 50 different systems, and there's so many different rules, and many of those rules are really relaxed. In terms of IDs, in terms of signature checking and things like that. So it's really an act of faith that it's done correctly. You got to kind of trust it, and if in a world where people don't trust each other, that blows up. Here's a good question that Charles had.
Oh, Chuck's
in.
Chuck and you are geniuses. And you guys go about. I'm not you guys, because you guys have such a kind of an almost academic pursuit of these things, which is remarkable. And while I'm just kind of that guy locked in his little mansion, who's just kind of foreseeing the world with one of those really big brains. That's the way I feel, You guys are awesome.
Oh, I'm sorry, my dog's here.
No, dogs are awesome. Just throw them something.
I got 2 border collies, so they tend to blow up at the slightest kick here. Okay, so Chuck was asking about, or pointing out that technology is everything. It is the communication system. So when you disconnect somebody from it, you are basically unpersoned. Your personhood has just been erased to a large extent. People poo-poo it. They say they still exist offline. But so much of what we do now in terms of getting jobs and doing business and doing everything is all done through that kind of online space. If you're running a small business, you have to have a presence online. You need to drive flow. You need to get online to be able to access all these services. And so without that, without access to these services, without access to this communication system, without access to all of the benefits, you aren't really a modern human being anymore. You're just not able to make the money and live the life and do the things that you want to do. It becomes an open air prison. They don't have to put you in jail in order to kind of make you not a problem anymore.
So they've threatened, and I say the left, and I'm fairly liberal, so these things are without definition, so they're fluid. So hopefully people can tolerate that. I'm not trying to give these things any characteristics or properties. I'm just saying what it is, right?
Yeah.
Loosely what it is. That the left has seemed to go into some type of prosecution mode of the right already. And is that something? I think the Lincoln Project has made a lot of threats, and it's been pretty explicit threats. And I've seen a lot of these things. Is that a real threat, or is that just trying to kind of force a quick alignment?
Oh, you have a very specific example of threatening companies, threatening individuals?
Yeah, there was, and I don't remember the instance because the social stuff I don't pay too much attention to. But there was some type of a thing that Lincoln Project thought gave safe haven to conservatives. And the person from Lincoln Project tweeted out, "Do you really want to get on the wrong side of us? We'll go after your investors, your lawyers, your employees." I mean, they were very prosecutorial about it.
Oh yeah, no, they're a troll shop. So, there's like it's like having an internet research agency inside the states.
They are also expressing a sentiment that all of us have seen from AOC on down, that there is some type of mischievousness to the left, and they're kind of boasting about it.
Oh, to be able to disconnect people. Yeah, it's wild to see people cheer this on, because it's going to come back and get them. I mean, they don't know what it's going to look like once you start letting this go, or there's no natural limiting factors involved here. It just keeps on growing, and the censorship and the disconnection and the anger. I mean, we start to disconnect thousands of people, then you start disconnecting tens of thousands of people, and if this thing starts rolling, then it's millions of people are disconnected, or monitored or squeezed. It's going to get very, very ugly, and there won't be anybody clapping at that point. It's a bad way to go. And they're otherwise intelligent people. It's really sad to see them go in that direction. It seems like they don't have anything other than this de-Trumpification effort that's in front of them, that they're trying to kind of push forward. And this is the embodiment of all evil Trump is, and Trump supporters. But no, I mean, this is going to affect us long after Trump becomes a historical footnote. It's going to affect all our lives. And you know what? The crazy part is that we're sitting on this capacity to do some amazing things and make some amazing wealth for everybody, and just do such amazing stuff. And between the technology and the global environment, and it's just terrible to see everyone just piss it all away.
It's remarkable. So at 8:07, G Purcell 1. Do you see their tweet at 8:07?
Okay, I'll go up to that.
And I'm just so interested in these things, and I've thought about them, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I guess we all are, right? And this thing looks so kind of kabuki theater kind of.
Is that the one?
Stage ready. It is. And there's what's your response to that? Just, you're a military type of person. And if you want to give your own kind of contextual background to this, just because of, the fields that you've been in, and then be responsive to the question.
Well, there's a couple elements in that. I mean, there's the political element, and that's been building for a while.
Let me just interrupt for 1 second. I
Sure.
just want everybody to know what the question is, right?
Yep.
So G Purcell 1, thank you so much for being here. Says, I think they had a plan ready to go January 21st. And so John is responding to that. So I apologize. Right. And can you go a little bit backward just to give you a background just in terms of military environment and theater and, kind of what you've seen, so that you can kind of project it forward to what we're seeing right now?
Oh, yeah. I'm ex-special ops, tier 1 special ops. Spend a lot of time in all the garden spots around the world. And then I started a bunch of internet companies. And then after that, I wrote a book on next generation terrorism and warfare called Brave New War. Got really popular with all the agencies and all the operators coming back from Iraq. It was about open source warfare. And since then, I've been writing about that. And now I'm doing my Patreon, where I'm writing reports on the intersection of that warfare, technology, and politics. And it seems to be kind of a fertile space. It's right where everything is happening right now. This is the kind of the place where the world is being made. It's just like the perfect place to be. So my background on this, or in the way I looked at this, is I've been writing about this for the last 3 years, and I saw that trend towards worrying about a terrorism threat, worrying about an insurgency threat from the right, and the hype that went into that. And that, every single incident turned into, everything's getting worse and worse and worse. And that, the military obviously responded because they had to actually plan, and were required to plan for this, and so people were planning different scenarios out, and that those things were in place. And when it finally did happen, when there was a call to have that happen, they just responded in full force, far in excess of what the actual threat is by any measure. I mean, that was an unarmed riot. There wasn't like firefights.
How much of that behavior do you think was kind of instrumentalized and orchestrated? I would say instrumentalized in terms of, these are already kind of emotionally fragile people, right? And they're already kind of agitated, and at the same time kind of orchestrated to get to this effect.
Oh, well, there's the online warfare, but the thing that really just kicked it into overdrive is just the event itself. The Capitol event was the thing that allowed it to happen. You could have all these preparations and everything set up and everything's pushed up to the limit, and then that one event just lets it go. And it was a result of a fork in Trump's insurgency. I mean, it was going in a direction that the rest of the Trump supporters wouldn't necessarily have supported at all. When it happened in a way that was completely unexpected. If the Capitol Police were in any way competent, and the defenses were set up correctly, and they had enough manpower, like all the protests in the past that have tried to get into the Capitol and failed, they would have been beaten down right at the.
So, do you feel that was kind of a malicious neglect, that the mayor there, and I'm not sure the organizational chart there, but that these things were kind of deliberately left exposed to violence, and it deliberately left open the opportunity for violence?
I mean, there is a possibility that somebody actually planned it out. I mean, you could say that somebody missed an opportunity when the protest was going after Trump in the White House last fall, and they were taking measures to kind of secure him because the protest was knocking down the gates. Now, if they had let them come in and go into the White House, it would have been provocation enough for all sorts of crackdown, just like we're seeing now, but aimed at the different protesters. So they really did try to fight and defend the Capitol. And every time they were overwhelmed, they pulled back. A lot of the lessons that they learned, or restrictions that they were under from last year, not to escalate, worked against them, and that I don't think they actually had a plan to do that. It was just a bunch of mistakes. I think one of the bigger problems was in terms of intelligence, is that kind of their inability to appreciate the threat based on the way that people were talking. There were lots of tiny groups and individuals making all sorts of plans and making all sorts of threats, but they were all of indeterminate size and indeterminate capabilities. Most of them didn't show up, and that given their experience with that kind of chatter, that nothing would happen.
So does it matter that there was infiltration by kind of agitating and violent insurgencies? And I don't know all these people's names, but I keep my chronicle. But I think one of them was named John Sullivan, who was what you think of as an open source insurgency, right? He was kind of part of that mechanism that they infiltrated it so as to create this effect, or just an effect of kind of collapse.
Obviously there were some participants. I mean, there were some participants from the right in Minnesota and the like. So everybody who wanted to see this escalate, see violence escalate, see the system accelerate towards collapse, they would go, they would attend, they would throw in on it. But there were a lot of people who felt very empowered based on what they saw last year. I mean, they saw people burn things. They saw people break down things. They saw people, taking, doing lots. I mean, taking out. I think it was 150 federal buildings were damaged. Police stations were burned down, and nothing happened to those folks for the most part, from their perspective. They didn't see any kind of mass mobilization like we saw today or saw this week in DC. And so they felt that they were able to go in there and do this kind of thing without any fear of retribution, any downside.
So at 8:22, and thank you so much, I was so thoughtful, and I got to think about all of that because I look at the influence of the infiltration operations from John Sullivan, and perhaps I give them too much weight. And your argument, it's at 8:22 from Rising Serpent, and your argument is there was insurgency operations going on, but that was just a contributing factor. It was kind of like just another ingredient in a violent cake.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's there were participants, and this is an open source effort. It means that there's lots of different groups, and none of them were that big. And there, a lot of solo operators. People just turned up based on their discussions online or based on what they've heard. And that's why they blew up all the that's why all the charges started, or threats started to percolate after the event, is because people were grabbing stuff off the message boards and taking the worst ones, the worst threats, and saying a threat has been mounted or being made against the Capitol and everything else, or that those threats were part of this event, but they couldn't actually match those threats to the people involved.
Rising Serpent, thank you so much for joining us.
Right.
I'm delighted that Rising Serpent is going to be, I'm hoping, joining the Investor Series on Thursday, because I'm so excited about it, because it's about Space Force. And John, you got to do the same thing. You know, I'm a big fan. I'm so excited about the future. And I'm such an optimist. I really am excited that millions of our kids are going to be living in space. So, Rising Serpent, John, would you be kind enough to read the question for those that can't see it?
Yeah, what's the difference between corporations and the far left in terms of ideology? Okay, well, I mean, what do you think? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I come out of Wall Street, right? And even 30 years ago, I saw the absolute demand for corporations, publicly traded companies, to have sequentially improved earnings. And you can only squeeze so much operational excellence and leverage out of these companies that either you're going to have moral corruption, where you're going to have outright fraud, as you had with Enron or Tyco. Tyco, people may not remember Tyco, but that was a big one as well during the time of Enron. So either you're going to have kind of like a moral corruption, where you built up a management team that supports fraud, right, that you had with Enron and Tyco. And I saw it from my own public companies that the demand for, again, sequentially improving earnings was a requirement. You had to do it, and so you would keep, you would sandbag, right? You would sandbag by having too many employees, too many W-2s that you knew if you needed to make earnings, you could fire them, right? Which is why I expected it. I talked about it last year. I knew that I was going to be a sandbag because I've been there, and you transfer them off of your balance sheet, and you let go of that risk. So societally, it's very dangerous. So when I see corporations, I don't think in terms of ideology beyond profit. I can't speak for the far left, because I'm such a, they're my opponent. I just don't like the far left, but I can't really capture what it is, and I don't see much alignment between the far left and the corporations, other than that the far left appears to be in the employ of the corporations, and the corporations have taken over. They have leased, for a premium too. They have leased the industrial activist complex that the Democrats had a monopoly on. So I think the left has become their phalanx. And I listen to people, my friends who are very left, and they're applauding kind of what they perceive as the collapse of the US, and they're so wrong, but they perceive it as the collapse of the US, and they're happy that the corporations are taking over because they think the corporations will be more responsive to their demands and more benevolent to the people. I look at it the other way. I look at it as the corporations are not going to be benevolent. They haven't demonstrated a willingness to even pay taxes. So I think that they're going to be merciless. I think once a king gets killed, usually all the other lords that before were being kept in check by the king or the prince would then settle all their scores, and they would kill everybody that was on, because there was no longer anything to constrain them. So I think I think that's happening now with the megacorps. They've unleashed some really bad stuff in society, and that's all I think. I think more about the corporations than I think about the left.
I mean, I've been writing about the tribalization of the left, and I don't see it so much in socialist terms as traditional far left. I see it more in terms of these online network tribes, whether it's the anti-racist or the anti-fascists or the anarchists. I mean, it's based on a unique tribal environment that you're able to build within this online space. And right now, I mean, when the companies are, the big corporations are starting to lock things down, trying to make sure that they continue to operate independently without ever being regulated or touched by the government. They're using those tribes of the left as cover, as allies, while they're wiping out the tribes on the right. Most of the services, most of the things that those tribes are demanding are having to do with censorship and having to do with restrictions on their enemies, and not so much in terms of sharing the wealth or moving forward economically and living a better life. It's all about power, and it's not it's something that companies have no problem delivering. And they can deliver that right now. It's costless.
Yeah, so they're transferring all of the risk to as a taxpayer burden, which is very interesting because I'm an expert on insurance, and I'm very, very familiar because of my own businesses with TriNet and Insperity, very familiar with the way group health insurance works and a whole bunch of things. So I saw what the danger was of Obamacare, that you were taking kind of the worst members of a health insurance plan and pushing them to a taxpayer burden, and they were keeping all the most desirable for themselves. So I understand kind of the actuarial tables of what was happening, and now I just see that they're going to fire all their W-2 employees because they introduced too much headline risk and too much threat of legislative risk, and they're going to turn them into contractors where those former radical left are going to be disemboweled. They're going to be so eager just to find a new job that they're not going to be able to go out there with their protest sign. At 8:19 p.m., do you see that from Bill Polk? One of the great Bitcoin bulls. The Bitcoin bulls were right. I was wrong. So at 8:19.
It won't let me go up that high.
You should be able to. So just try scrolling for a little bit. So at 8:19, Bill Polk, again, one of the great Bitcoin advocates and evangelists, and I was a skeptic. And then I did something with Anthony Pompliano, and he pushed me over a little bit, and then I did something with Milton Demers, and that's it. And now I'm a raving Bitcoin fan. So everybody was right and I was wrong. So Bill Polk says, will they raise corporate taxes, and will that drive markets down? I can't answer that. I can answer the latter part of it, which is, will it drive markets down? I don't see anything driving these markets down. We have the most liquid, most transparent stock markets in probably in human history. We've also got the most regulatory oversight in our markets. We have the most opportunity for pristine information. So in Bitcoin, it's been kind of asymmetrical, the quality of the information, right? And there's been a lot of momentum. for several years, there's been momentum, but there's also been, and when you have momentum, you have that trend, and you have a lot of misperceptions about it. And there was very little opportunity for a layperson or a person that didn't want to, dig into all the time and effort to understand it. It was asymmetrical. I didn't know when to buy in or when to sell. I didn't understand how these forks kind of, the implications of all the forks. So I can say that I think the markets are going to skyrocket. I just think there's no reason for them not to double and triple from here. The problem, I think, is going to be the distribution of wealth is going to considerably narrow. You're going to have less people owning those stocks. You're going to have less people reaping their dividends, because a lot of these now are going to start offering dividends as well, or increase their dividends to create value to their shareholders. So, and that's another lever that they have, right? So I think that earnings, there's nothing that's going to stop earnings. There's earnings improvement. There's nothing that's going to stop kind of the cartelization and the defragmentation, and they can just keep on affording to buy their competitors out and continue to put up legal hurdles to new entrants, which is really what TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was all about. It was taking these aging monopolies and protecting, giving them protections that younger companies can't have. So I'm a raging bull on the market. Will they raise corporate taxes? I don't really see a lot of ways for them to do it because of the different tax inversions that are available to corporations, the different tax treaties that are available to corporations, the different tax routes that are available to them. There used to be something called the Dutch Irish or the Irish Dutch, whatever it was called. I forgot which one came first, which is corporations would essentially create a domicile overseas, register a patent there, and then have a very convoluted scheme that ultimately the tax route led to a tax haven like the Cayman Islands. Those are still available. And if you recall, when Google became Alphabet, they did a wholesale change. And what they did was their tax route ultimately ended up in Delaware. So Delaware has now become the Cayman Islands for the world. And there's no way to pierce that veil. So I don't see no, I don't think the corporate taxes are going to be a problem. And nor do I think I think the markets are going to soar. I think there's going to be less of a distribution of the wealth, and it's going to be very painful for the lower and middle class. They're not going to like it, and there's going to be very little room for economic, social, and political ladder climbing.
Yeah, I mean, the big part of this roll up is the destruction of all the small businesses. It's just, that's where 80% of the unemployment is in small businesses, and those things are getting destroyed. And all that money coming in for COVID relief, a huge portion of it's going to the big companies, the listed companies, and they're just they weren't even damaged that much by COVID, and they're getting that extra lift. And that just zooms that market. As those small companies go away and that competition goes away, you just make more money, and then the government becomes more reliant on them and more focused on their needs and catering to their needs. It's all part of this kind of big roll up that you've been talking about, and it's going to make this crackdown all the easier for the big companies.
So I'm going to find some questions that are a little bit lower down. And I see Tracy 1115 at 821 said that Parler was back for a few minutes, but down again. I have, I understand that people think of Parler as an alternative. I don't. And I'm sure the ownership of it is very nice. And I'm sure they're trying to build some type of operational resilience, particularly now, and kind of build a fortress. But I don't see that as being a safe haven. I think if you're going to beat Twitter, you got to beat it from inside.
Yeah, I mean, trying to get off the major platforms or hide to have a personal conversation, it's fine, but it's not an alternative strategy. I mean, this is a global information war, a guerrilla global information war, according to Marshall McLuhan, and I agree. Is that you have to fight for the platforms. You have to fight for a presence on the platforms. That's where it is. There's no alternative space. You can make them, and as we just saw, they're easily destroyed. it's about influencing the major platforms and getting them to relent on their crackdown, and finding ways to do that. That's hard. You're not going to get that through alternatives. What we saw about the kind of coordination involved, I mean, not only the big companies, but it created a cascade of disconnections that went across. The Parler CEO was talking about his lawyers left him, his text vendor left him, his email vendor left him. It just one after another, and everything disconnects from you. That kind of disconnection, even down to the ISP level, like they're talking about now, trying to enlist the ISPs to start disconnecting political opponents. That has ramifications, well beyond even the political system here. I mean, that was the first time, and first Bitcoin I owned was $1, right? So, I mean, I've been watching that for a long while, and I've tried to work in alternative, decentralized ways. I mean, I worked on the early social networking in 2001, and we built it as a decentralized system, RSS and everything else. So I've been around decentralization for a long time, and this is the first time I really saw the death of Bitcoin, the potential death of Bitcoin, the risk associated with all of these big platforms acting in concert because they think that Bitcoin's involved in terrorist financing or it's being used in XYZ and it's not regulated, it's not controlled, and then it has to be eliminated. And all of these companies are doing this in some part to actually make more money. I mean, for instance, the ISPs start cutting people off because of political reasons, and they're allowed to do that. Well, what's to stop them from starting to charge sites for access to their networks? Like Verizon's been wanting to do this forever, to turn their ISP into a cable system where they're able to charge each of the big sites money for access. And so that's a money making opportunity. It's just like you could hold sites hostage, or they'll be disconnected. It's once you corrupt the system, everything gets corrupted. There's
some really interesting questions here, and I have a question. She's making a statement, but it's a question. Love Deb 33 at 8:47 p.m.
Okay, I got that one.
Okay, so thank you so much, Love Deb 33, for joining us. I'm excited about this. I asked John to do this at the last minute. So Love Deb 33, if you can put that comment up there, John, says
she has two. Will never silence us?
Yes. Can dissent and kind of the open source insurgencies that you've spoken of that align with dissent, right? Can they be silenced?
Yes. Yes. I mean, disconnection is a potent force. It is, like we're saying, that's not the big communication systems. It's everything, and it cascades. I mean, you can build alternative systems. Sure. I mean, you can build alternative communication systems, but it's a guerrilla kind of, Scotch tape and baling wire kind of system. It can't scale. It's not something you're going to have a kind of a large conversation with. It's, you're conversing in the onesies and twosies and small group levels. It's tough, to run on the outside. And I've been watching terrorist networks and insurgents operate forever. It's tough to be outside. It's an uphill battle to even do the simple stuff. And that there's ways around it, but ultimately, you want a place on the major systems. You want those major systems to open up, to relent, and my solution to that is that, the way we get through this without ripping each other apart, without having a hot insurgency operating in the states, is that we force the platforms in particular to accept a kind of a digital constitution with a digital bill of rights that says, okay, if you have a named account, you have rights to speech. And here's the extreme limit. I mean, only in the most extraneous circumstances you're going to be kicked off. And if you violate those, then you'll have some time off, but you will eventually come back.
You suggested that. I saw you on Twitter, with some type of, it wasn't a thread. Maybe if it was a thread, but it was one tweet about that. So, but do you feel that that's kind of this Plato republic rather than kind of the actual of the world we live in.
No, I mean, it's okay. So if social networking is like a new communication system, it's a new technology. It's rewiring our brains, changing the way we interact, just the same way that the printing press did, and it launched us into building nation states and building vast global markets and building a science infrastructure and things like that. Well, with this social networking is a piece of it, and it's something that we're going to have to get our arms around and turn it into a useful social decision-making system, something that can move us forward. And the way we do that is to bind it, is to put limits on it. I mean, we put limits on the big government bureaucracy, governments, because we know that they can do damage to us, but we also know that there's benefits to having it. And we spend a lot of time working on ways to ensure that it operates in the right way, and we enshrine certain rights to protect us from its.
Well, let me ask you a question.
I like to see the same thing on the networks.
Will elites permit that, or don't elites only permit such things, kind of intrusions into their own power if they're threatened? And I don't see any threat that the plebs have against the elites that would force them to give up some power.
How do you force them to give up power? Well, I mean, it's an asymmetric conflict, granted.
Like for example, in kind of a political theory thing, right? The idea of the tribune is something that exists, to represent the people, and it's not necessarily the most powerful kind of force in a republic, but it is there, kind of our Congress, to be kind of that intermediary between the elites, kind of their own kind of monarchy, however it kind of presents itself, and the plebs, right? So
right.
We don't have a tribune that exists between the plebs on social media and the elites, who kind of have the gate keys.
Right. We don't have a Magna Carta. We don't have a rule set that works anymore. And if you can be erased by corporate action without any protections, and people say, the Bill of Rights doesn't really apply because these companies operate outside of it. It's a workaround. It's a new set of powers. It's actually more complete. Corporations have much more say on your life and your quality of your life than the government does. And you barely interact with the government and the government services. Corporations impact your life every minute from the moment you pop open your phone in the morning until you go to bed. So, and these are networked, and they're internetworked, and they're all connected in a way that makes it possible to operate.
But doesn't
outside of that system.
I want to respond to Love Deb with another question, and then I see if you can, in the meantime, go over to Autumn NRN at 8:45 p.m. And then I want to respond to this last part of Love Deb's, but if you could get that one ready to go at 8:45 p.m. So Love Deb 33 asks, says, you will never silence us. And you, having seen so many insurgencies and so many guerrilla tactics, right? Can these various movements, be populist movements, be silenced? And at a certain point, haven't you taken away all the society safety valves, which then becomes violent?
Is this the one?
Yeah. So my question that you missed in the meantime was, what happens when you take away all the society safety valves?
Right. And you get oppressed. And when you have a system that's not self-limiting, that's going to keep on growing because it's profitable to do so, it has allies that will fight in the street for it, that has ability to control the political process, because frankly, there isn't a politician that can go up against those companies now. I mean, Elizabeth Warren tried in the primary, she got whacked. Okay. There's a dozen different ways to manipulate the algos. We're going to manipulate the AIs to sink a candidate at this point. There's no way you can get elected without the support of the major social networks.
So now, yeah, I apologize. So now, Autumn, thank you so much for being here. Autumn NRN says, go back to go back and get a ham license. And that is kind of a tactic, right? I mean, we even saw Nellie Orr do that as a way of kind of circumventing regular surveillance systems when she was using an encrypted ham radio in her communications as part of this whole kind of Trump Russia gate type of thing. So what's your thought on is ham license kind of a viable channel?
Yeah, and you can talk to people and say, hello, are you as oppressed as I am? And they say, yeah, I am. And from halfway around the world or next door. It's more of an insurgency thing. It's an outsider thing to do. I mean, but we shouldn't just aspire to be outsiders. I mean, I want everybody participating. I mean, this is, if we can get everybody participating in this economy, in this system, in this society, we're better off for it. And if we let this kind of disconnection roll on, that's not going to happen. There's forces at work here that are going to, do very bad things to us.
Okay, so Love Deb at 33 said something interesting as well at 8:42, and Love Deb said, as you get that one up, it's at 8:42. She says, "Never thought I would say this, but I'm for Bitcoin." I never thought I would say it also, but I'm for Bitcoin also. I didn't look at it as kind of a valid argument, and now because a lot of the people who are kind of evangelists for Bitcoin also insisted that the dollar has to collapse and this and that, and they're just completely wrong. They just know nothing about what they're talking about when it comes to the dollar, because the dollar ain't collapsing. But a lot of the substance of their argument that I did appreciate, and I really got it when I was doing the Investor Series with Milton Demirs. Bill Pulte joined us, L.A. Jen joined us, and Eric Finman joined us, and they all basically said the same thing, is that it restores kind of a sovereignty, almost a constitutional sovereignty to the individual, and that they become kind of their own soldiers, kind of fortifying Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an early investor, that's true. I mean, you can make a mint. If you bought in at 10 or 20 or 30 or $100 or $1,000, you're doing pretty good right now. That gives you a little sovereignty in the system. I just always worry about it when people start pumping Bitcoin, is that they're pumping their own account. It's like if you can get people excited about it as the be all and end all of actually breaking away from the system, that's kind of a marketing gimmick. I just I love that Bitcoin's out there. I love that alternative voices are out there. I love that there are systems out there to allow people to interact in ways that aren't directly approved by powers that be, the elites, the establishment. It makes me sleep better at night.
So Paul Dunscombe at 8:46. Yep. And I want to be very respectful for people's time. So while John's answering, I'm gonna look for the questions. So Paul Dunscombe at 8:46, and I know this is something that you've discussed as well, John. From your military standpoint, because you're an expert, Dave. From a military way, when I look at Parler, I look at the retreat of Spartacus. Right? They just kept on backing Spartacus against the cliffs. So Paul Dunscombe, thank you so much for joining us. And it looks like you're in a helicopter, like you're piloting a plane.
There's the pilot.
Awesome. So and Paul Dunscombe says Parler did not have a biz model advantage over Twitter's mode.
So what do you think that means?
I think what Paul is saying is that their only business model was to be a sanctuary for people who've been kicked off of Twitter.
Right.
And then somebody else here, I think it's Gary Faulkner, says that it's a fly trap, that Parler is a fly trap. What do you think?
Right, like a honeypot. It was set up to kind of grab everybody's information, identify them, make all that information available for analysts and the like to pull off threats and show how terrible everybody is. Yeah, it ended up becoming that in actuality, right? Because that once that information was dumped, that's being used to fuel almost all of the charges that there are terrorism. Terrorism is on the way in volume. So it doesn't really matter if it was set up that way to begin with. It ended up that way.
So Dr. Segzi, thank you so much for joining us at 8:56. And I know that Dr. Segzi has 2 exotic cats. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I've got 2 unexotic cats, but I love them. Annie and my half Maine Coon, who's over there sleeping. They're both asleep until I throw them temptations. Then they all kind of come to life. Dr. Sexy, thank you so much for joining us. It's at 8:56, John. Says, what is stopping a hostile takeover of these social media companies from the investor side? Well, hostile takeovers really don't happen too much anymore. In fact, there's a lot of mechanisms that really prevent such things, poison pills. And so instead, what you have is you've got just bidding it up and then doing a proxy to acquire the shares, where you're kind of compelling people to sell it through by doing a proxy and finding out where all the stock is held and then acquiring it. And then there's activist shareholders who take a majority stake in a company and then demand that some of their people be put on the board of directors, and they'll guide it. But everybody is looking to improve shareholder value. I don't think ideology is really part of this. I think that they're really just focused on improving shareholder value. And activist shareholders are kind of a terrorist type of action in themselves, although they do create improvement of shareholder value. Sometimes it's at a very human expense. But so when you say what is stopping a hostile takeover of these social media companies from the investor side, so I would suppose that would mean if Peter Thiel or some type of more friendly to the right oligarch were to come in, or Elon Musk, right, were to come in, they could just bid up Twitter and buy it. Theoretically, they could. They could get in, they could engage in kind of a bidding war, but then they also have to find people who agree to sell it to them. Right. And sometimes that's more than just the price. So when people see what is happening with Twitter, people see what's happening with Facebook, I look at it from the investor side. I think that there's investors who are threatening the company with legislative, with headlines. And
by actually cracking down, they're giving themselves breathing room. They're buying some protection. They're doing things that they actually that the senators and the Congress people can't ask them to do. Right? I mean, they couldn't write your legislation to actually do what they did. The disconnections that they're making right now. So they're doing it for them, and that's kind of the payment is that they're not going to be regulated. They're not going to be broken up. They're not going to have any real oversight, because all they have to say is that next time you're in trouble, we're not going to do anything. In fact, as long as this threat remains on the right, that if you want our support in this, you want our support in this conflict, leave us alone. Let us continue to make money the way we're making.
So I see it. The very next comment is at 8:56, and it's Scribonius, who says satellite phones. I want to be responsive to that. And John, you're an expert on this stuff more than I am. But satellite phones, I do know communications because I've been an investor in a few different companies where we kind of pry into them. So it's at 8:56. It's right below Dr. Sexy's. It says satellite phones. I suppose what you mean is satellite phones is an alternative that isn't so readily available to intelligence agencies and to kind of penetration. And unfortunately, could you put that up there, John, if you don't mind? It's at 8:56.
56.
Yeah. So Scribonius says satellite phones, and I think you mean it as an alternative, and they're not. So when you take a look at satellite phones like the Thuraya, the new Thuraya satellite phone, those were very much used.
That's the one.
No. It's at 8:56. It's right above it from Scribonius. It's about 2 above. So
satellite phones.
Yeah. So those Thuraya phones have been used by the Catalan separatists, and they were used by the Yellow Vest, because those are movements, and John knows this. John's an expert on it. I'm just kind of reading his blog about this stuff. So But those are literally open source movements that were well funded and that were equipped with these type of satellite phones. But those satellite phones also can be shut down locally. They're really not a solution. They're a temporary fix.
Yeah, most of them are bent pipe. So that, you know, there's a satellite connection to a ground station, then you just connect to that. Yeah, I got one of my first, actually my first real civilian job after getting out of the military at Forrester by presenting on Iridium, a Motorola's Iridium satellite phone system. Because I was an astronautical engineer, and it was like, oh, a chance for me to combine all that knowledge of tech. And the big downfall of Iridium was that it's a 2600 baud. I mean, its data rate was so low and locked in that they put all the emphasis on the voice quality, and that was their downfall. But satellite phones are connected into the existing system. There's not, it's very kind of expensive to chew up all that bandwidth, hopping directly to the satellite and going all around satellite to satellite to satellite to then drop down on somebody. So what they end up doing is they pop it up and back down, and then it just travels off over the terrestrial link, the closest one, and it's cheap. So it's negligible cost. And then if that's the case, then you get disconnected at that point, the moment you hit the terrestrial system. Or there's no real sanctuary in a networked world where everything's interconnected all the way down to the wire. I mean, you have to build it from scratch, and if you build it from scratch, you're always looking over your shoulder that if you get too big, that they're going to shut you down.
So let me ask you a question, and there's a lot of questions here, so we're going to dig through them really quick. And normally, I'm the host, and I get to say you're in a speed round, and now I'm the guest, and I get to say, John, you're in the speed round. So I will. So let me just ask this then. So as you know better than I do all this type of stuff, and I think, and Jack Posobiec is very familiar with it also, much more than I am. So I don't want to misrepresent myself, but like a lot of these well-funded terrorist groups or drug cartels like the Zetas, right? They've built their own intranet in Mexico that run from state to state, their own internet, right? They've built their own pipeline for the internet that runs state to state. And I think I learned from you that Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah even have their own tech help desk. I mean, they've got it, but that was never able to be shut down. I mean, they were never able to shut down the Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Hezbollah communications infrastructure or that of the Zetas.
All right, but I mean, look how they lived. I mean, really, it's really, really rough. It's rough. And they were constantly being surveilled. They didn't shut down the big systems. It's not like they had accounts anywhere. It's a rough existence, and you don't want to go there. It's like totally disconnecting from the grid and saying, I'm gonna rough it because I don't want to be part of this system. It's a tough existence. It's not easy. It's cold in winter, and it's hard to get that food. It's hard to do anything. Everything's tougher. I mean, it's not disparaging the life, but it's not what we're used to.
We're not good. We're kind of soft and not good at being a guerrilla warfare. I get your point.
Yeah. No, there is a way to fight back. I think it's actually coming up with something positive and can be pushed. And that digital bill of rights is the way to go. I mean, if you don't at least get some security in your access, that you can't just be kicked off because somebody doesn't like what you say on political grounds, then you're not a participant in this society.
But are there too many factions right now to be able to ever kind of build alliances that have so much fidelity, that would have so much fidelity that they can push such a thing?
No, you can do it if you flip a couple of the big CEOs, because we're in an oligarchy kind of situation where these guys are incredibly wealthy, and a lot of their whims get instantiated in terms of how these companies are actually operated. If you can flip a Bezos, if you can flip a Musk, if you can flip even a Jack, I mean, it's like if you can get somebody in some position of power in these companies to flip and become an advocate. And I think we have some.
So we're going to skip on, and can you go to at 8:57 ISIT 1984 yet one? And I will say, I don't think Jack from Twitter is particularly a bad person. I think of you actually when I think of people like Jack, because I think that it's the people who are giving them information, like how they control what you call like that OODA loop. Is that right?
OODA, yeah.
It's kind of that loop, that information feedback loop and positive feedback loop that he's kind of a self-reinforcing loop that he's kind of stuck in the middle of. So
okay, which one do you want?
ISIT. Oh, is it 1984 yet at 8:57? They say the No Agenda Show podcast has active ham users. Do you see that? At 8:57, is it 1984 yet is the name of their account, which is pretty cool. And it says,
oh, yeah.
So is it 1984 yet? I'll say it again. It's kind of cool. It says the No Agenda Show, which I want to be on. I actually reached out, and I know Adam and I follow each other, but I want to be on that because I'm a fan of it. The No Agenda Show podcast has active ham users. That's awesome. Can we just skip on, John? I just wanted to throw that in there. The one right below it says, Caw says, open source social media built on blockchain will be a solution, I suppose. Is that possible, John?
Conceptually. I just haven't seen it operate effectively. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it still gets into that disconnection problem. There was it's kind of cool and all. Yeah, no, I mean, I've been in alternative guerrilla warfare kind of stuff and all the, how you can use technology and all, lots of great ways, kind of even the odds. And also on the green side, how you can actually do a lot of stuff using hacks of technology to produce things that you shouldn't be able to produce. But you end up in this, my friend Bruce Sterling is a science fiction writer, and he calls it, a favela chic, right? Is that, it's kind of this favela kind of right out of Sao Paulo, it's like ramshackle building built on top of building. Everything's it's kind of cool because everything's kind of DIY, but it's a slum, man. You don't want to live in a slum. At the end of the day, that's what it is.
So I want to continue on. So the very next question is from Monroe Oriole. And I'm going to respond to this question a little bit, John, just because I'm so involved in investments in Space Force and startups. Okay. And then I'll let you hunt other questions, right? So it's kind of like a behind the scenes type of thing. So Kahaw, and thank you so much for joining us. And I recognize that picture. It's a very nice picture. So thank you. It says it's got a lot of trees and a nice overlook. So it's kind of comforting to see. So open source. So Kahaw says, no, I'm wrong. Let's go one below. Monroe Oriole. That's the one. Yeah, and now, John, find other questions, right? And because then we're going to close up. So Monroe Oriole says, if you are a white male, they're going to make it impossible to hold a job. I disagree. I really do. I think what it's going to be sad because we're seeing kind of a caste system built in front of our eyes, and we're seeing those who have an education, those who are articulate, those who can hold on to complex concepts, communicate complexity, and have a familiarity with the classics, and can speak in the language of their specialization, are going to have just a great future ahead of them. Which is one of the reasons I'm so eager about Space Force, is because it's going to create millions of new jobs for those people. While as right now there's a scarcity for a lot of jobs, and we're seeing kind of an intra-elite kind of battle. As these kids are graduating from law school, from STEM schools, and there's not enough jobs to accommodate them, you're going to see millions of new jobs. And I do worry that it's actually going to be the exact opposite. It's going to be the white males that are now holding on and that have foreclosed the opportunity for competition. If you take a look at the reports on colleges, what people are graduating with, you can see all this, what they're doing, advanced PhDs in, what they're doing academic papers, post-graduation in. it's a lot of our overseas students who are coming here to get their education are doing a lot of the smart AI, STEM. Our own students, our own indigenous kids, many of them are getting a lot of degrees in gender studies, social science type of stuff that creates no system-wide value. They're not. So you're going to have a future where you've got kids that have a lot of wounds on them. They can't get a job. They're semi-literate. They're maladjusted, and they're going to have a lot of battle scars on them, and they're just not going to have any type of understanding of how they acquired such a thing. So I think the opportunities I understand why it's intimidating to people because they see the rhetoric, but I have to look at the reality is those people who possess the education are going to get the jobs, and we're foreclosing on the opportunities for our disadvantaged youth and our minority youth to be able to.
Yeah, exactly. That whole college policy that we had, it was total disaster. I mean, pushed all these people into college, gave them debt, unlimited debt to go do it. And, for a lot of people, they didn't even have any counseling or any kind of direction on where they should, what they should study and what it would be worth once they were finished with college. It's just like, you get to college and people are trying to sell you on this or that program that's something that's interesting, and they didn't have any counseling at home or at the school that said, you know what, when you graduate, you're not going to be able to make any money on this. This is $15,000 a year job at the end. And you're going to owe $100K. It's just we overproduced them, and now they're not willing to admit that the policy was wrong. I mean, they're willing to kind of pay off all that debt, but not admit that the policy that created it is wrong. Because if they hadn't, if it was the right policy, people wouldn't have any problem paying off that debt.
I think of them as anti-consequentialists. And I will say that a lot of these words that I've used, and I'll probably wind up introducing some more into this conversation, even though we're going to be winding up. I've had to read a lot of philosophy, a lot of political theory books. I've always enjoyed them, but now I've had to really kind of take on kind of studiously because I needed to understand this moment in our time, and I see everything happening, but I needed to have the language so I could explain it to myself. John?
So I got probably a closer question. I mean, given the name of this podcast, what's the worst case scenario in reference to how social media companies will power from the Marshall Lakes? It's disconnecting thousands, initially tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of people, potentially even millions of people from this online world. And based on what they're saying, based on their political views, and that doesn't just stop at disconnecting from the major social networking companies. It has a knock-on effect to every single social service or service you get from the network. I mean, we use it for everything, from dating to job search to everything else. And once you're disconnected, you don't get access to that stuff. You can become a pariah. One of the things that there's a synergy here between what's going on with these companies and their disconnection and what is happening with this counterterrorism, this Patriot Act 2.0 kind of thinking, and potentially even counterinsurgency. It's synergistic. So the worse that gets, the more rationale or more reason people have to disconnect them on the corporate side. And it feeds itself. And one thing we saw in Iraq was seeing insurgency after insurgency is that if you break the local systems or you put people out of jobs, you make them dependent on whoever's going to help them get through the day. And it's usually other people who are as disgruntled as they are. And it's not a good situation to get into. So, I mean, that's one. I mean, long term, that keeps on going, that keeps on rolling. The aperture, the number of things that you could actually talk about, say or do, gets more and more narrow, more and more extreme, and nobody can say anything that's not officially approved or establishment approved because it's dangerous. Anti-vax is dangerous. Anti-round world is dangerous. I mean, it's like that is all stuff that's not going to be allowed. And
yeah, I will say that because I know we need to close up. I'm just so appreciative of people here that I see their comments, but we're going to leave that one on because that'll be the closing comment, right?
Right.
But,
thanks, Marshawn.
yeah, I see that Gary Faulkner, and I want to know how your business is doing. He's we met through Jack Murphy, and really impressed. So, and I want to know how the business is doing. And they say, are you saying intelligence will be the differentiator? There's a lot of different ways that intelligence expresses itself. There's social intelligence. There's kind of a cognitive intelligence. There's artistic intelligence. But they need to be there needs to be an awareness of developing them, and it's going to be a wild future because people really need to have kind of awareness of themselves. It's going to be a caste system. It's going to be the W-2s versus the contractors. You want to make sure you're on the right side of that. The nobles are going to be the W-2s, and one of the distinguishing marks is going to be that an awareness of that intelligence. And then I'll say Scribonius, and we're going to close up with that, with your comment that you want to put on there. But no, leave that one on. I'll leave the one from Dunscombe. But Scribonius says the space station needs a gender studies officer. That's really funny. You made me laugh when I was watching that. John?
Yeah,
go to Paul's question so we can close up on that.
Okay, yeah. Have you read cyberpunk stuff? Do you know Bruce Sterling and Gibson? Have you read any of their books?
I have.
Okay, so it was big at the time in the 90s, particularly in the early days of the internet. It was like to help you think this through, how it operates. And to a large extent, it's kind of describing exactly what we have right now. This big roll up of corporate centralization, these global companies, and they're throwing punches at each other, and anyone hacks them, they're dead. The companies kill them. And everyone, for the most part, is living in this kind of squalor. Except for if you're hooked up with the big companies, you do well. You travel around the world. You're connected. You're moneyed. You're well cared for, and that's kind of this globalized situation that we're finding ourselves. I guess we're getting that. That's the science fiction we got in the 90s and 80s, and it's coming true to a certain extent, which is bad. It's not the future we would hope to see. But there's ways around it. We can still do this. We can still get through this.
So we're going to close up with that. But I see some people's comments, so we're not going to put it up there. But I'm appreciative that they've joined us. But John, don't put them up there just because I want to make sure that we're closing up with the moment.
Yeah, we're going to close it up. Yep.
So R Zims says my daughter opted for welding before college. Loves it. Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll tell you something. My friends spun out of SpaceX. They founded a new company called Relativity. And do you know that they're hiring welders? The demand for welders is, your daughter made a good decision, and her limitation is going to be that she can't really arbitrage. She needs to arbitrage human capital, right? Because there's only one of her. So hopefully she'll have a chance to create a business that has a lot of welders in space. So I'm excited. I'm excited. And I think that was it. I saw something else that was interesting, but I don't think I'm going to find it again. Unless I should. I don't think I'll see it. That was it. So that was it. We did it. So much fun. And I'm so appreciative that you joined us on short notice.
So thank you, everybody, for coming. It was great. You guys had great questions. Had a lot of fun doing this. Sunday evening chat. Yeah.
Click that. See that button all the way on. John, this is John's first time using it. So, John, click that button on your upper right-hand corner where it says like end broadcast. I'm going to stay with you, but everybody else isn't. So, John and I have to say goodnight to each other, and good night to everybody. And thank you so much for allowing John and I to be the guest on your feed.
Great. Thanks.
Click that button.